Greetings. Thank you all so much for joining this edition of the Notion at Work webcast. I am William Nutt from Nutt Labs. We're an integrated digital strategy firm and Notion consultancy. And I also run the independent website Notion VIP, where I publish tools and insights about all things Notion. You can access that at notion.vip. And you can find me on Twitter at William Nutt. So today I'm excited to explore a powerful system for task management in Notion. And I'm going to walk through the full system. Then afterward, we'll do some Q&A. So you can add your questions as we go within the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of Crowdcast, if that's where you're tuning in from, and we'll address those at the end. So how you sequence your tasks varies by project. And in some cases, all tasks are assigned a date when they're created. In many other cases, tasks depend on other tasks. And for ongoing projects, tasks recur at regular intervals. And sometimes tasks have no clear deadlines or dependencies, in which case they need an automated method of prioritization. And few Notion workspaces effectively accommodate all of these needs: scheduling, dependency, recurrence, and automated prioritization. And I'm going to expand my shared screen here. So drawing from popular methodologies like getting things done and the Eisenhower Matrix, Bulletproof Task Management integrates these needs within a sophisticated, streamlined system that's manageable for every user. It's a core part of my comprehensive Bulletproof workspace, which we've covered on previous editions of Notion at Work, and you can find at notion.vip/bulletproof. But this system integrates seamlessly really into any Notion workspace. You can develop it from scratch on your own, or you can duplicate the fully developed template, which I'm making available to viewers who are tuning in here at 75% off. So if you scroll to the top of the chat, you'll see a link to the corresponding post, and that has the template linked within it. And you can use the code Notion at Work, all one word, for that discount. So if you've joined previous episodes of Notion at Work or used any of my other resources, you likely know that my foremost recommendation for any Notion workspace is to centralize information within related master databases, then create filtered views of that information within contextual dashboards. So like the Bulletproof workspace, this Bulletproof Task Management system upholds that principle. And at its core is a master tasks database, which centralizes all of the tasks within your workspace. And the template also includes a handful of complementary databases to demonstrate the various contexts in which you can manage your tasks. And we'll take a look at some of those here today. So within that master tasks database is an intelligent status property. It's sort of the mission control of this system. It's a formula property that populates automatically according to various conditions. And while this may seem overly complex, it's actually a method of simplification. So among other benefits, it allows the system to accommodate many needs without requiring that all properties be populated for each task. It allows you to filter and sort your tasks in a variety of helpful ways, and it surfaces tasks needing attention rather than letting them get overlooked and further delayed. So each task will have one of 7 possible statuses. 4 are healthy statuses, and the other 3 indicate that the task needs attention. So if the status is complete, the task is non-recurring and fully completed. Scheduled means the task is assigned a date that is not yet passed. And a task awaiting dependency depends on another task that remains uncompleted. And then someday means that the task is safely logged to be scheduled sometime in the future. If a task fails to meet those criteria for good health, it will be deemed a needs attention task, and it'll be surfaced to the top of most views so you can address it. So overdue indicates that a task's assigned date has already passed. Reschedule means a recurring task has been completed and needs rescheduling, and needs date or dependency means the task is assigned neither a date nor a dependency. And this status can also be just needs date, in which case the assigned dependency has already been completed. And these criteria are hierarchical. So, for example, a completed non-recurring task will ignore a due date. Its status will be complete rather than scheduled or overdue. And a task whose dependency is an uncompleted someday task will inherit that someday status. So even if you don't mark a task as someday, if it depends on a someday task, it too will be indicated as someday in the status property. So for an even more useful snapshot of a task, the statuses can include secondary notes I call flags. If a task has a primary status other than awaiting dependency, such as scheduled, but it's also assigned an uncompleted dependency, it will have the awaiting dependency flag. Recurring tasks include their frequency as a flag, such as weekly, and tasks can have both the awaiting dependency and frequency flags. Sometimes a project's tasks have no deadlines or dependencies to dictate a sequence. So that's where the prioritizer comes in. And as you'll see, the prioritizer is a view of tasks within the project template. And it's adapted from the Eisenhower Matrix, which prioritizes tasks based on their urgency and importance. So with the prioritizer, you can assign each task a value of high, medium, or low for 4 properties. You can assign high, medium, or low for a task's urgency, for its impact, which is Marie Poulin's adaptation of the Eisenhower Matrix, for its workload, which encourages you to knock out the quicker tasks first, and enjoyment, which is kind of my adaptation of the eat the frog approach, where you complete the least desirable task first. So populating these properties for a project's unscheduled and independent tasks will calculate their priorities, and then it'll sort them according to those calculated priorities. And then that allows you to assign them sequential dates. So let's take a look at all the properties that make up the tasks database. And there are a lot, but please remember that these properties are intended to accommodate various types of scheduling rather than requiring that all of these inputs be applied to each task. And so for this demo, I've segmented them into a few different views that you won't need and you won't find in the template. And before I jump into these properties, I'm going to peek over at Crowdcast just to make sure that we are heard and seen. And it looks like we are. So I will keep on moving. So the first property, first we'll look at kind of the primary properties of this tasks database. And the first one, of course, is that almighty status property, where you can see those primary statuses and, as applicable, the flags. And that, of course, is a formula that returns a value based on a variety of different considerations. So our title property is the actual task itself. So if you're, mowing the lawn or scheduling a meeting with David, this is where you write out the actual task. And of course, it'll be much longer than these sort of alphabetical placeholders. And generally, I encourage you to wrap the text within each table view so that you can view the full task without having to click into it. And so then we have a person property, and this is the person that's responsible for completing the task. Now, this is really only going to apply to team workspaces. If you're using this system independently, either, at work or even personally, all the tasks are generally going to be assigned to you. So you don't need to assign a person responsible. So if you're building out this system on your own, you can exclude this property. If you're using the template, you can delete the property. Just be sure to remove it from any filtered views beforehand. And then we have 2 date properties. And we have a DUE date and a DO date. So This is borrowed from our good friend August Bradley, friend of the show here. And a due date, DUE, is going to be the deadline, the latest kind of date when the task needs to be completed. And this would typically be managed by a manager or a project manager. So the person responsible knows when at the latest time the task needs to be completed. But the DO date allows that person responsible for completing the task to schedule when they're going to do the actual work for the task. So again, this is intended for teams. If you are using the workspace independently, then you probably just need to schedule when you're going to do the work, not when at the latest it needs to be completed. So you can eliminate that DUE date. However, this is a factor in the status calculations and other formula properties. So just be sure to update all those formulas to reference the DO date rather than the DUE date. And the same is true for sorting rules and filters. You want to make sure that any of those that reference DUE are going to reference DO instead of DUE. So then we have a relation property where we indicate a task's dependency. So this relation is actually related to the same database. It's related to the tasks database. So for any task that depends on another task, you can choose that dependency. So you just click into it, and that's going to give you a full list of all of the tasks within the same database. You can choose one as the dependency, and that's going to inform the calculated status. It could likely change it to a waiting dependency if that other task has not yet been completed. And then we have a select property when we can choose a frequency for recurring tasks. And of course, that too is going to have an impact on the calculated status, and as well as the flags that are included in that status. All recurring tasks are going to include their frequency as flags. And so this time slot property, another select property, is going to be for the person responsible for completing the task, just as the DO date property is. So as you'll see within kind of the personalized dashboard that we'll see, where an individual can view all of the tasks assigned to him or her, there's going to be a view of just today's task, the task that they have scheduled to complete today. So that view is going to be a board that groups the task by this time slot, and you can drag the cards into different time slots. That makes it easy to schedule your day and ensure that it's balanced and that you can complete your tasks efficiently. So then this last of the primary properties here is just a checkbox. It's the complete property that you check off when the task is completed. And if it's not a recurring task, it'll change that status to complete and filter it out of most views. If it's a recurring task, what it'll do is it will change the status to reschedule. And of course, you'll have that flag to know just when to reschedule it. So those are kind of the primary tasks. Let's look at the other related databases. So of course, the task database relates to itself, as we saw for choosing the dependency, but it also relates to a couple of other databases. And this kind of gets back to my foremost recommendation for using Notion, which is to centralize everything within related master databases. These interrelations between databases allow you to view them in really useful filtered ways. And one of the best examples of that is this task project relationship. So in most productivity methodologies, a project is really just going to be comprised of a series of tasks. Projects are kind of the parent in the relationship. Tasks are the children. So every task is going to correspond with a project. So we have an independent projects database, and it's related to the tasks database through this relation property. So for each task, we have a project selected. Now, you're very rarely going to be working with your tasks directly within this tasks database. Instead, you're going to be managing your tasks mostly within their projects and within your dashboards. So within the project template, there's going to be a filtered view of tasks that displays only the tasks that are related to that project. And in order to make that possible, we have this relation. So you can see here that there's a project selected for each task. Now, also within most productivity methodologies, including kind of my bulletproof approach, as well as the para method, which has informed a lot of Notion specific methodologies. We have kind of a higher level category of classification, and I call it buckets. In para, it's called areas. In some cases, it's called spaces. August Bradley calls it pillars in his system. But generally speaking, this top level hierarchical classification is going to serve as just the high level categories of all of the information within your workspace. And that allows you to open up any of these buckets and see filtered views of all of your information within them. So if you're familiar with relations and rollups, this will make sense to you. If not, no worries. As you become more accustomed to using them, it will. But every task, as I said, is related to a project. It's a child and parent relationship. And every project is going to be related to a bucket. There's a relation directly between projects and buckets. So rather than also manually creating a relation between tasks and buckets, what a rollup allows us to do is pull in the bucket for each project that's associated with the task. So it's automated, and that's going to keep your information really consistent, free of errors, and it's going to reduce the redundancy in your work. Now, another of my big recommendations for using Notion, particularly in the context of work, is to have a consolidated, centralized database for all your meetings and events and even conversations. And that's part of the Bulletproof framework. And I've included that in the example databases here. So we have a stripped down version of our meetings and events database, and it's related to the tasks database, as you see here in this relation property. And so within the meeting template, as you'll see, there's a filtered view of tasks. So as you're conducting your meeting and action items emerge, you can add them directly to the tasks database. And you can choose their project and you can assign them to people and all that other associated information with tasks, but they're going to be automatically related to that meeting so that you can reference them moving forward, that filtered list. So those are the other related databases for the tasks database. So here's the prioritizer I mentioned. And for the prioritizer, you're going to have those 4 select properties where you can choose high, medium, or low values for urgency, impact, workload, and enjoyment. And this formula property, the priority property, is going to calculate the priority automatically based on those values. And then again, you're going to be doing this primarily within your projects template. You won't be doing it directly here, but I created this view just for demonstration's sake. But that view is going to sort your tasks based on the calculated priority, and that will allow you to assign them dates in sequence according to priority. And then lastly, we have a couple of invisible properties. We have a status ID formula, and this is really the brains of the status property, the pretty status property. This is what's going to interpret all the different variables and return an integer value, which is kind of an ID for a particular status. And then that actual status property, which uses the emojis and the friendly verbiage, that's going to interpret the ID. It's going to kind of translate it into friendly terms and consider a few other factors in order to add flags and other small modifications. Now, this rollup property, dependency status, what this does for tasks that are assigned dependencies, it's going to just pull in the status ID for the dependency. And then the final status property is going to include that as it kind of translates and determines exactly which status to generate. So remember, these views here, you're not going to need. They're not a part of the template. And also remember that very rarely, if ever, will you access your tasks database directly. Instead, you're going to be working with your tasks, managing your tasks within contextual views, primarily within the projects template and within dashboards. But I have included 2 different views here of the task database just in case you need to edit them in bulk or view all of your recurring tasks, as you'll see. So the default view is going to be just all tasks displayed as a table, and it's got just kind of those primary properties which you may need to reference as you're viewing your tasks or editing your tasks in bulk. And then we have a board that groups your recurring tasks by their frequency. So if you want a snapshot of all of your recurring tasks across projects, you can view them nicely here within this board where they're grouped once again by frequency. But you really will never access all of your tasks directly within the tasks database. Instead, you'll view them within contextual dashboards. So let's look at some of those. So I've included a few of these sample related databases, and these are fully stripped down only to display the tasks within them. In real life, in the Bulletproof framework, they include a lot more information, but we're just focused on tasks here today. So let's look at the projects database. So I have 4 sample projects here, each of which contain different types of kind of task assignments, but they're all based on the same template with the same views of the tasks database. So we have, I had created a view just to create this demonstration, but we have a project template that's going to have a self-referencing filter that will then allow the tasks database to populate only with those that are related to the project being created. So let's open up this one project to see what I mean. Project A. So when you create a new project with the template, it's only going to show the tasks that are related to that new project. And when you create a new project, of course, it's not going to have any tasks yet. So you can create them directly within these views. And when you create a new task within any of these filtered views, by default, they'll be related to this new project. So you don't have to choose the project manually. So the first view within the filtered tasks database within these projects is going to be a task pipeline. And it's going to display all of your tasks except for the completed tasks. And it's going to sort them by their status ID technically, which is going to surface all of the tasks that require your attention or those unhealthy statuses. And then it'll be followed by those that are scheduled and awaiting dependencies and have other healthy statuses. So this is all designed to give you a really quick snapshot of the status of a task and to address the ones that need attention urgently. And of course, they're going to contain their flags as well to provide some additional context. So this view provides all of sort of the essential properties that you'll need to manage your tasks, including the ability to assign dependencies, and you'll have your frequency information, and of course, schedule a due date, or if you are adapting this for personal use or independent business use, that'll be a DO date. So the second view of tasks within your projects is going to be another board of recurring tasks. So this sample project just has one recurring task for demonstration purposes, but you can see that it's just like that other board. So for any project, you can see its recurring tasks within this board, and this will primarily pertain to what I call ongoing projects versus active projects. To me, an active project has a conclusion, a final outcome, whereas an ongoing project is really going to consist of recurring tasks that are continuously rescheduled. So for an ongoing project, and we'll see one in a second, you're going to have more of these recurring tasks, and you'll be able to see them all listed by their frequency. So then, of course, we have that prioritizer view, and this is going to be for those tasks that really have no clearly defined due date or dependency. So you can do this exercise within the project, assign levels of urgency, impact, workload, and enjoyment to calculate a priority automatically, sort by that priority automatically, and then you can schedule dates sequentially according to that sorting. And then lastly, we have an all tasks view, which is just like that task pipeline view, but it's going to include complete tasks. So you'll be able to see the whole history of your tasks for a project. So that task pipeline is actually going to include complete tasks if they are recurring, because they're going to have that reschedule status, because they don't need to be filtered out or archived in any way. They need attention. You need to reschedule them. And of course, they'll have that flag that indicates exactly when they need to be rescheduled. So going back to our projects, we can see an example project that contains mostly dependent tasks. Remember, these project templates contain a lot more information typically, but right now we're just focused on tasks. So all of these tasks, with the exception of the first one, contain a dependency. They all depend on the task above it. And so they, for the most part, have an awaiting dependency status, except for task H also has a date scheduled. So its status is scheduled, but it has that awaiting dependency flag. And of course, all of these projects have all of the views that we just took a look at. So project D is an example of recurring tasks. And so all of these are going to have an associated frequency, and they're going to need a date associated with them. Otherwise, they'll get this emergency need state or dependency status. But if we look at our recurring board here, you can see that it's nicely populated with all of our different example recurring tasks. And then our last project type is going to be prioritized tasks, which is just another example of our prioritization exercise, where we've assigned urgency, impact, workload, and enjoyment for each of these properties. And that has automatically prioritized them and sorted them. And so we were able to just assign sequential dates according to that automated prioritization. So within these projects, this is really where you're going to be managing your tasks the most. And sometimes it doesn't seem ideal to assign every task to a project, but if you get in the habit of doing that, it's really going to keep your system durable and sustainable. And it's going to keep you organized, and you're going to be able to maintain cognitive peace around your system just because you know exactly how it works. So sometimes you may want to create a project that serves as sort of a catch-all. I have a few projects within buckets that are kind of like ongoing admin projects, or you'll find a way to label your group tasks that might not necessarily have a clearly defined project. But if you get in the habit of doing that, it'll make your workspace much more manageable in the long run. So our task database, as you'll recall, is also related to a meetings and events database. And just like projects, these meetings and events typically contain a lot more information. And that's all part of the Bulletproof framework, the broader one, but we're just focused on tasks here today. So as you conduct your meeting and action items emerge, you can populate them directly within this filtered view of tasks, and this is going to automatically relate them to this meeting for ongoing reference. And as you populate them, you can assign dates, people responsible. If this is a team workspace, you can assign it to a project so that it will also appear within those filter project views, dependencies, and so forth. So this is all part of what I call the formal meeting template. In the Bulletproof Workspace, there's also a simple meeting template that is just a little bit more straightforward without integrations with other databases. So that is meetings and events. So, and those are the other related databases. Let's look now at our contextual dashboard. So we're going to have two. And just like the other databases, these dashboards typically contain a lot more information, but we're just focused on tasks today. So the first is going to be kind of a personalized dashboard for individual people on your team. And the other dashboard is going to be an organization dashboard for the full team. And if you're working independently, what you can do is kind of merge the features of both of these dashboards in order to suit your preferences. And I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here. So you can see on this individual dashboard, the default view of tasks is called the planner. And so all of the task views within this dashboard are going to be filtered for the assignee property or the person responsible property. And it's only going to show the tasks where this individual is the person responsible, or technically it's going to be, the filter is going to include the me option, which means that this dashboard can be duplicated, and whoever signed into Notion and using the dashboard is only going to see the tasks where they're the person responsible. But again, if you're using this individually, all the tasks are going to be yours. So you're not going to need that responsible property or this filter. So this planner view, of course, is a table that displays all of those essential properties, and it's only going to show the tasks where the DUE date is within the next month or already passed, in which case it's going to have an unhealthy status. But the individual can use this to then schedule exactly when the tasks are going to be completed. So remember, this DO property is for the use of the individual who's actually going to complete the task. So this will be sorted first by the status, so that all of the danger zone statuses are surfaced to the top. But it's also going to be filtered by the DUE date that makes scheduling the DO date easy. And so remember, we also have that today board that I mentioned that groups by time span. So for all the tasks that have been assigned a DO date for today, those are going to display in this today board. And this is where those time span properties, or time slot, properties. Sometimes I say time frame too. There's a lot of words for this. This is where these are really helpful, because we're grouping by these time slots. And when today arrives and we have all of these tasks with this DO date scheduled, we can drag them throughout our day to balance our day nicely and ensure that we complete our tasks in an efficient way. And these cards are going to display helpful information, the most helpful properties within them. And as the individual completes the task throughout the day, they can mark them complete, and that's going to filter them out of this view. So that's the individual dashboard. And then lastly, we have our sort of organization dashboard. And this too is going to have two views of the tasks database. The first of which is going to be a needs attention view. So for all of the tasks across the workspace, for all projects, this is going to display all the ones that have unhealthy statuses so that they can be tended to immediately. And it's going to include helpful information associated with them, including the project that they're associated with, of course, the sort of inherited bucket, the bucket that's inherited from the related project, the person responsible, and so forth. And then the other view is just going to display all of the tasks for the entire workspace that have a date assigned within the next week. So theoretically, you'd have a lot of projects across your team. You don't want to display more than just this week's, but it could be helpful to display all the projects for the upcoming week so that you can discuss them in a meeting or just keep tabs on them. And of course, you can adjust these filters and these views to suit your own preferences. And if you're using the workspace independently, this is not going to suit your needs ideally, most likely. So you can kind of blend this organizational dashboard with that individual dashboard to suit your own needs. That's what I do. So that is a walkthrough of the Bulletproof Task Management system. And you obviously that's kind of a quick walkthrough, but you'll have this recorded video to reference as you really roll up your sleeves and implement it on your own. It'll be on YouTube. You've got that post on Notion VIP that's at the top of the chat. I'll also include that in the follow-up email. And if you've got that template that you can duplicate within your own workspace. I want that to be accessible to everyone who's joining us here. So you've got that discounted rate for the next little while here. So with that, I'm going to jump into the questions. And once again, please use that Ask a Question feature at the bottom of Crowdcast because that will help us to stay kind of organized here. So I'm going to jump in there and see what we got. It says, can you start the live stream on YouTube? People are still waiting for it to start over there. Okay. Well, that's we're obviously a little too late for that. I'm sorry to hear that that didn't work. I know that there are at times some problems with Crowdcast's integration with YouTube. So sorry for anyone who has hung around for that. But what we'll always be able to do is upload it like a new video, and that'll be available for perpetual reference. So sorry about that, and hopefully we can work with Crowdcast to resolve that issue in the future. Somebody asked, I recently purchased Bulletproof 2.0 template. Is that different from what you're referring to today? So that's a great question, Kevin. This is going to be a part, it's going to be the update for Bulletproof Workspace 2.1. So this is I'm offering as kind of an independent guide, an independent system, an independent template, but it is going to be a big enhancement to the broader Bulletproof Workspace. So I'm excited to release that as Bulletproof 2.1. So anyone who has registered, who has subscribed to the updates for the Bulletproof Workspace will be getting an email soon with a new link and detailed instructions for incorporating this system into previous versions of the Bulletproof Workspace. Tim, hey, thanks for joining us. For anyone who doesn't know Tim, he is an absolute Notion pro. Tim, please share your links and your Twitter handle within the chat so everybody can follow you. So he says, I try to minimize the amount of fields I have to enter when creating a task. Do you think the priority formula is worth thinking about and filling out the tags? So Tim, that's a good question. That gets back to the point where this seems really complex, but it's really intended to accommodate these various methods of organizing and prioritizing your tasks without requiring them. So if you typically you will not need that prioritization exercise. Typically a task will have a date when it needs to be completed or a dependency. But in the case where you have just kind of like a side project, it's more of like a want-to-do idea versus anything that's really kind of in demand by a client or a manager. And you've got just like an aggregation of tasks associated with it, and you don't really know where to start. That's where you can take the time to do this prioritization exercise. Now, the Eisenhower Matrix is it only includes two factors, and that is urgency and importance. Marie Pullen, in place of importance, she chooses impact, which I really like, and I think she just sticks to those two. But a lot of this is born out of my own experience working with other users and working with it myself. And so I have found that I also like to consider the workload, which is basically like the time required, as well as how much I'm dreading it, basically, which is the enjoyment factor. I like to factor those into the calculation for prioritization. Now, I'm glad you asked that because I want to point out that those first two priorities are double weighted. So urgency and impact are going to carry twice the weight of workload and enjoyment. Or at least the formula can be tweaked accordingly. I experimented with that. And so if that's something that users here think would be helpful to boost the weight of those first two properties, let me know and I'll let you know how to tweak the formula accordingly. But that's a really good point, Tim, and I appreciate the question. All right, Christina asks, curious about the dependency property. Since you have a single property there, would it appear as though a task and its dependency were actual dependent on each other? Could you use a two-way sync there to indicate progression instead? So that's a really good question, Christina. When I was building this out and experimenting and testing it before it was bulletproof, if you will, I was using a two-way sync. That made sense. I thought that it would be useful. It would be important to know whether a task had dependencies. Honestly, I tried to automatically sort tasks according to their dependencies, but it got complicated real fast. Notion's not quite capable of doing that in a way that doesn't just get way overly complex. So I found that the two-way sync for task dependency was unnecessary and just created a higher level of complexity. And honestly, it was just more demand on Notion. You know, what it's doing under the hood when it's creating all these calculations. These task lists can get really expansive and demand a lot of everything Notion's doing under the hood. And so we want to minimize that demand on the system. And I found that by creating just a one-way relation there, we were able to reduce that load on the system. But if you did, want to build this in a way where there is a two-way sync, there's no explicit, prohibitive reason not to, if you find value in that. So big Bulletproof Workspace includes a yearly subscription. How about the Bulletproof Task Management? One-time payment? Yeah, so I haven't done a subscription to task management because I don't foresee a ton of updates. If there are any tweaks that I make to this, I will just make it to the same version of the template and make it available to anyone who has purchased it previously. I'm not worried about requiring ongoing payment just for this particular system. But if you do subscribe to the workspace, of course, any updates to this specific element of it and will appear in future versions of the workspace. Okay. I'm just we have a lot of questions here. I appreciate all the engagement. So someone asked about assigning dependent tasks and assigning multiple dependent tasks. So this goes back to kind of the same explanation as the two-way sync. I found that we're trying to find a balance here between like keeping things manageable in your head and accommodating a variety of different needs. So I experimented I experimented with multiple dependent tasks for a single task. And in my testing personally and with a few kind of preliminary users that I was working with, the system finds that right balance between capability and simplicity if each task just has a single dependency. So you as you assign your dependencies, you want to think through the sequence in which you want to complete your tasks and then choose your dependencies accordingly. Now, what this does, when I was first using Notion, I was basically just establishing a sequence for tasks by I was just assigning numbers like 1 through 10 for them. And so anytime I added a new task to the sequence, if it plugged into the middle of the sequence, I needed to redo all of the integers for that sorting order. So one of the benefits I've enjoyed most about this dependency system is that if you do sort your tasks by dependency, or if you do kind of sequence your tasks by dependency, if you plug a new task into the system, if it falls somewhere in the middle of the sequence, all you have to do is update one dependency and none of the other dependencies need to be adjusted. So if you assign your dependency according to the initial sequence, it's really easy to just plug in a new task that may fall within the middle of the sequence and only update one dependency. Now, the sorting is not going to be automatic based on these dependencies. And that's not ideal. I really wanted to find a way to sort these tasks according to the dependency sequence. But what I found getting back to that, manageable, simplicity versus capability balance, that right now, the way that Notion works is you're just going to want to drag your tasks. You can drag your tasks within the project views into the correct sequence. And that's going to give you a little pop-up that says, do you want to break your sorting rules? And you can say cancel, but the dragging that you've done that prompted that message is going to, it will remain in place. So when you're viewing your tasks, and I'll pop over, I know we're running a little bit over time or we're right at time here, but just as a last step here, let's look at this dependent tasks project. So if we look at our task pipeline for these dependent tasks, you can see that the dependency has a consistent order with the tasks. So for task K, the dependency is J, and that's going to be the next one up. So it's kind of a zigzag. J depends on I, next one up. I depends on H, next one up. So what you can do is you can drag these tasks, and it's going to give you that pop-up that asks if you want to remove your sorting. You can just say cancel, and the switch that you made is going to remain in place. So again, not ideal, but I've been using this a lot independently. And if it is at all an inconvenience at first, you'll get used to it. And it really makes sorting your tasks, your dependent tasks, really useful to view in this way. So that puts us a little bit over time. But please let me know if you have any other questions. I'm again on Twitter at William Nutt, and also responsive to the comments on the YouTube videos and all that kind of jazz. So thank you again for tuning in here today, and I'm excited to see what you build with all of these strategies, and please enjoy the rest of the week.